Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and in this video we'll talk about another archetype for Arkham Horror the card game. This one revolves around over-succeeding on skill tests. This archetype is extremely common, so we'll be looking at a very large amount of cards today, so let's get going. When you take a skill test in the game, you compare your modified skill value to the difficulty level of the test. To pass the test, you only need to match the difficulty level. However, most of the time when you are trying to cover most of the negative tokens in the Chaos bag, you won't draw those tokens, and instead you'll over-succeed on the skill test. Thankfully, a lot of cards in the game don't waste your extra effort. Usually, succeed by X means by 2, but we'll see cards that care about other numbers too. Of course, if you're going all in on this strategy, you'll really want to expend a lot of resources for a big payoff, so if you draw the auto fail, it will really ruin your day. Because this archetype is so far-reaching, it has a lot of strong payoff cards, and it's very easy to enable it because boosting your skill value up high is already something the game wants you to do. In fact, there are a number of scenarios themselves that ask you to succeed by some number in order to produce an effect. This archetype has the most cards in the Rogue class, with Seeker in somewhat distant second place. Rogue is, after all, the high-risk, high-reward class. But all the classes have some cards in this archetype, so you'll be able to find some help from your off-class too. Since we're going to see a lot of cards today, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about any of them. So if you want to read the card's text, feel free to pause the video or look up the card on ArkhamDB. To help us out, I've divided the cards into 3 sections based on how the cards contribute to the archetype. First, we have the enablers. These cards do nothing but help you succeed by X. Of course, committing extra cards or the like also helps you succeed by X, but as you'll see, these cards only make sense in this archetype. Next, we have cards that both help you succeed by X and give you a good payoff for doing so. In some sense, these cards are an engine in of themselves. Finally, we have cards that are pure payoff for succeeding by X. They really require you to commit other card slots to cards that help you boost your skill value, but the payoffs are very strong. I've also divided the cards up as best I could by function. That is, most of the weapons are together, most of the clue-getting cards are together, etc. This will help you think about collections of cards you might want in a single deck for added consistency. Before we get to the cards, let's go over an example to help us evaluate the impact of these cards. When I think about succeed by X, I ask myself if the payoff is worth putting extra cards and resources into an engine that goes above and beyond just passing the skill test. Those cards could have been used to solve more diverse problems in the game, or just be more consistent as passing the test in the first place. This is especially true on harder difficulty levels, or later on in a campaign where just passing a test at all is tough. But with the right investigators and the right balance of cards, Succeed by X is very powerful. Let's look at a classic Succeed by 2 engine. Finn Edwards didn't quite make the cut of the most likely investigators list at the end of the video, but he sure is a strong honorable mention. His Elder Sign ability even taunts you to succeed by 2 as much as possible. Anyhow, Lucky Cigarette Case gives a fantastic benefit for succeeding by 2, drawing a card. Card draw will win you a lot of games, but is it worth the accessory slot, 2 resources, and the action to play it? Well, that depends on how often you will trigger it. We'll use a standard Chaos bag from the Midnight Masks to make some calculations. Let's say you do nothing but investigate 2 Shroud locations. With just Lucky Cigarette Case in play, you'll succeed on the test about 75% of the time, and succeed by 2 only 25% of the time. Those odds are not good, but with additional card support you can do better. Let's add lockpicks to the mix. Now we'll be adding Finn's 4 agility to the test. We'll now succeed on the test 94% of the time, and we'll trigger the card draw 94% of the time as well. Just the auto fail beats us. Lockpicks already asks us to succeed by 2, or else we'll lose 1 supply from the card, so this is a natural fit. Sure, this requires us to get both cards in hand and pay for them, but the initial investment nearly guarantees 1 clue and a card to draw every turn. Of course, not every location is going to have a Shroud of 2. Let's bump that up to a Shroud of 3 and see how the numbers change. With just the Lucky Cigarette case in play, your odds of succeeding the test at 4 to 3 go down to 56%. Triggering the card draw dwindles to 6%. Again, this is not a card we want to play if we have no enablers. So let's add lockpicks back to the mix, and our chance of success is still at 94%, and the card draw only happens 88% of the time, which is still incredibly high. Let's go ahead and add one more card, Opportunist, a skill that gives you one wild icon and can be reused on a test as long as you succeed by 3. Our chance of success, of course, is still at 94%, but now so is succeeding by 2. And we'll have an 88% chance of getting the Opportunist back into our hand. While the Opportunist is not necessary, you'll start to feel better about the more difficult tests if you commit it and have a decent chance of returning to your hand. This Lucky Cigarette case lockpicks engine is also a good example of a safe combination of cards. If you don't succeed by 2 and instead succeed by only 0 or 1, you won't get the card draw, but you'll still get the clue. It's not the end of the world. Other cards, as we'll see, have a much bigger consequence for not over-succeeding. If you aren't in a good position to succeed by about 85% of the time, you probably shouldn't be playing this archetype. Okay, we'll start with the enablers. Keep in mind these cards when we get to the payoffs, because their value really is only as good as the payoffs themselves. Daring Maneuver is a card that acts somewhat like Lucky. Holding it in hand allows you to take bigger risks on your skill tests. If you absolutely must succeed by 2 on a skill test, on standard difficulty you'll need to be up 6 on the test to beat the -4 token. If that's too tall of a task, Daring Maneuver will help you out. Now you'll only need to be up 4 on the test. If you succeed by 2 anyways, great, you'll just save Daring Maneuver for another test. The level 2 version works the same way with a greater benefit. Knight of Swords will give you an extra 1 skill value for every test that you succeed. Note that you do not exhaust the card for its effect. Whereas Daring Maneuver and the like can only save you if you already were passing the test, these two cards can save you if you failed the test. We have Sure Gamble, which can dramatically turn a test failure into succeeding by a lot, and Lucky Level 3, which is much the same thing. It can turn a fail by 1 into a succeed by 2. None of these cards in the list will help you out if you draw the auto-fail symbol though, because that will set your skill value to 0 with no other possible modifications. We've seen Opportunist before, and it has an upgraded version that returns to your hand if you succeed by 2 instead of by 3. The benefit of these cards is to put you over the edge to trigger Succeed by X effects on several other cards over and over again, when it could have been somewhat difficult to get that extra skill boost. It's kind of like a cheaper, less consistent Knight of Swords. Next, I've listed a few cards that always give you +2 or more to your skill value. There are plenty more in the card pool, and these don't have any particular synergy with Succeed by X, but as assets in play, they can be used round after round. Now we've moved on to cards that ask you to succeed by X, but also give you a skill boost to get there. The level 0 Derringer is a good example of the archetype at work. This card is pretty bad if you couldn't succeed by 2. Why use the weapon at all? Well, at least you'll do 1 damage as a consolation prize, but as a weapon, that's not very good. But combine this with a Lucky Cigarette case, an Opportunist, perhaps some other cards, now you're getting a lot more value out of over-succeeding. The level 2 version even offers you an additional action if you can succeed by 3. I put the level 2 Switchblade here. It's basically an ammo-less Derringer, but we'll see the level 0 one later on. More weapons. These 3 weapons exhaust when you use them. You can only ready them if you succeed by 2 or more. If you're in a fight and you need to fire more than once, you must absolutely succeed by 2. The level 2 Mauser and the Beretta both give you benefits for succeeding by 4 or more. These 3 weapons do extra damage when you succeed by some number. The 2 shotguns do damage equal to the amount you succeed by, to a maximum of 5 or 3, depending on the cards. these are good places for the daring maneuver to shine. The rogue 45 Thompson will do its damage to another enemy at your location as long as you succeed by that other enemy's fight value. It's kind of like a free successful fight action. Again, all of these cards help you succeed by a lot. That's probably no more true than the Cyclopean Hammer, where you are likely fighting at least 8 skill value, and it will deal 3 damage as long as you succeed by 3. Grim Memoir gives you the +2 intellect to help succeed by 2 for the card draw, and Thieves' Kit level 3 gives a little help to gain you the extra resource. This cycle of cards from the Dream Eaters is kind of the same way. All of them give you 3 skill icons on a basic fight, investigate or evade, and a strong benefit if you succeed by 2. This is a little unusual in the Survivor card pool, but at level 1, many different investigators from other classes can take these cards. There's also a set of skill cards from most of the classes that are very similar. Each one gives you 3 skill icons and draws you 2 cards instead of 1 if you succeed by 2. Next, Vicious Blow and Deduction have level 2 versions that deal an extra damage or discover an extra clue if you succeed by 2. Any of these skill cards are excellent ways to make sure you enable any of the Succeed by X benefits on the assets we just looked at. For example, Vicious Blow 2 on a shotgun attack can deal up to 7 damage, and the 2 icons on Vicious Blow itself really helps you get there. Last in the series is Fearless level 2, which heals some extra horror. This is a little bit less value as there aren't too many assets that ask you to test willpower and succeed by 2 or more. Okay, next we're moving on to cards that add 2 of your skills together. These are fantastic cards for investigators whose sum of these skills equals 8, but other investigators can run them too. Although the value in this archetype is that the cards help you over-succeed, they're also fine choices in situations where you just need help passing the skill test itself, even if you don't succeed by 2. We've already seen the level 1 version of lockpicks, and there is a level 0 version that breaks immediately when you do not succeed by 2. It is still a fine card in the archetype, but if you can, you'll want to upgrade to the level 1 version right away. Suggestion is the evade version of lockpicks. There is a level 1 and level 4 version, and they both add your willpower to your agility. We'll now see quite a few events that add 2 skills together and do something if you succeed by a certain amount. Cheap Shot is the fight one, and the level 2 returns to your hand if you succeed by 3. Slip Away is the evade one with the same pattern between level 0 and level 2. And to round out the cycle, we have Breaking and Entering to help us investigate tough locations. Our last card is Impromptu Barrier, which is a bit of a strange card. There are 2 other Survivor events that are played from your discard pile, but only this one cares about succeeding by X. We've now moved on to the pure payoffs. You'll need help from other cards in order to get the maximum amount of benefits from these cards. On this page, we have 3 cards that gain resources for each point that you succeed by. None of them see much play, but Burglary might be a good place to throw a Perception level 2. These 3 cards that gain resources, however, see a lot of play. Watch This and Gregory Gry let you place bets on your success. And Pickpocketing level 2 is an engine itself, drawing you a card and gaining you a resource as long as you successfully evade by 2. Speaking of card draw, we've returned to Lucky Cigarette Case. Its upgrade is in contention for one of the strongest cards in the game. You only need to succeed by 1 now, but succeeding by any more than that opens you up to drawing precisely the card you want in your deck. But if you want more than 1 card at a time, look no further than All In. You'll draw up to 5 cards if you over-succeed by that many, and the card itself does help you out, just like Opportunist, but this card stands alone as an explosive payoff. More card draw. Unsurprisingly, we've moved on to the Seeker class. Both versions of Feed the Mind draw you extra cards for each point you succeed by. And empirical hypothesis lets you do other things with the evidence it collects if you succeed by 3, but at bare minimum, before you do any upgrades, you can just draw a card, a little bit like Lucky Cigarette Case, but without the slot. Back to the rogue cards. This time, we get extra actions if we succeed by X. In particular, I'll Take That gives us a play action and a cost reduction to put down an item asset, which is a little bit like the Markings of Isis upgrade for archaic glyphs, but this one can be any asset at all. Nimble gives us a number of free moves based on how much we succeeded by. Back to the rare survivor cards in the archetype. Scavenging returns an item in our discard pile to our hand as long as we succeed by 2. Most survivors, other than Daryl Simmons, will need a lot of help in doing that, but the card is available to many investigators at level 0. The upgrade saves us the play action when we pick it up from the discard. Okay, let's look at some healing cards. There are 2 versions of Precious Memento, which change whether or not you'll heal horror or damage when you succeed by 2. And both copies of Earthly Serenity heal as much as you succeed by on the willpower test. 2 more healing cards, this time in Seeker. Medical Texts heals you for 2 damage if you succeed on the intellect test by 2 or more. And Grey's Anatomy does much the same thing, but you can let it inflict extra damage on an enemy. Which means I think we're back to talking about weapons and enemies. If you're wondering about this weapon when we talked about shotguns earlier, well, here it is. It can deal up to 6 damage now, but you'll need help succeeding by 6 because this weapon gives you absolutely no skill boosts. Which is exactly the same for the level 0 Switchblade. If you want either of these cards to work, you'll need to invest in a lot of other cards to help boost your skill value. Backstab and Pilfer, level 3 versions, also don't give you any help with succeeding in the skill test. They have some pretty great effects, and if you do succeed by 2, you'll get to return them to your hand at the end of your turn. They are on the pricier side of events though, so if you want to play them more than a few times, make sure you can afford it. Okay, we're almost done. These cards all discover clues on over success. The number of clues discovered for archaic glyphs, guiding stones, and research notes is only limited by the number of points you succeed by. These are certainly cards you would build a deck around. For Belly the Beast, just 1 clue if you evade an enemy by 2 or more. These 3 cards reduce the difficulty of a future test if you over-succeed on this one. Momentum is for anything, Breach the Door is for shroud values, and Expose Weakness is for fighting an enemy. It's worth noting that Breach the Door lasts for the rest of the game. Okay, we have reached the end. I had nowhere else to put these cards, so here they are. Onyx Pentacle is one of many other cards that often has Doom placed on it by its own effect. Strangely, the way to get rid of the Doom is to succeed by 2 on the evasion test. Alright, we've made it, at long last, to the 5 most likely investigators to dabble in this archetype. First up is Rex Murphy. Succeed by 2 is right there on his investigator card. The effect is one of the strongest in the game. Discover a clue. He only has 4 intellect, so he needs a little help succeeding by 2 on most locations, but that is where Magnifying Glass or Grim Memoir comes in. With 5 off-color cards, he can even add Scavenging or Lucky Cigarette Case to his deck, or even Lockpicks level 0. Unsurprisingly, we're about to see a lot of rogue investigators. Kaimani Jones also wants to succeed by 2 or even more. Their ability allows you to flat out discard exhausted enemies as long as you can succeed by their remaining health on an evasion attempt. Kaimani gets a slight boost natively, but something like Suggestion can ensure you even discard the largest of non-elite enemies. Monterey Jack is a hybrid rogue seeker investigator. While you're limited to only level 0 rogue cards, his stat line encourages you to take advantage of any card that allows you to add your intellect and agility together, like breaking and entering, slip away, and lockpicks. Once you get into the secret card pool, you can start adding in the upgraded perceptions, deductions, and get some benefits off of the empirical hypothesis. Next up is Tony Morgan, because he can use all the Succeed by X weapons like no other rogue. Most rogue fighters have exactly 3 combat, and those weapons were designed around that number. Well, Tony Morgan has 5 combat, so succeeding by 2 on a Mauser or Beretta is much easier to do. And if there's a home for the sawed-off shotgun, it's here. Finally, we have Winifred Habermuck. While she has a great stat line and excellent rogue access to all the Succeed by X cards, her ability is why she is on this list. You are encouraged to commit cards to nearly every skill test you take. Many investigators will have a hard time recuperating the cards and resources they invest in over succeeding. Not Winifred. The cards she commits are the fuel to over succeeding, and they allow her to draw more cards to commit in the future. Even her Elder Sign allows you to return cards back to her hand, only to commit them again. That is the end of this archetype guide. I hope you enjoyed looking at the cards, and there sure were a lot of them, and maybe you have some ideas for your next deck and campaign in Arkham Horror the card game. If you have any other thoughts or some fun Succeed by X builds, leave them in the comments below, and feel free to check out some of my other Arkham Horror videos here on the channel. See you in the next one.